take a seat to go on to the next panel. And my panelists are leaving the podium not because they're going on strike, but just because they want to be able to see each other's presentations. And we'll come back on once we're answering questions and going into the Q&A. But so we've been given the task to talk about museums and heritage decolonization. I'm the director of the Pitt Rivers Museum, and it's a real pleasure to be here in person. I was going to only be able to dial in, but I was lucky to be able to change my plans and was so pleased yesterday because I was walking around the museum and I thought, wow, they're doing everything and they're doing it so well. So it was really, really nice to actually be in the Ulster Museum and then obviously be able to stroll around the botanical gardens was an extra one. While the weather forecasts were quite bad for the last couple of days, but actually they've been fabulous. So it's been wonderful to be here. And it's really, on the one hand, I am also a little bit anxious, as Corinne was also saying earlier, around making sure that we're wearing face coverings and making sure that we're protecting each other, and especially those of us who live with vulnerabilities. But at the same time, it's just such an extra dimension to be able to see each other in person. So I'm just really pleased to be here and really pleased to be sharing with all of you, and the fact that you're live streaming this, which congratulations to the team, because that always gives this extra stress and extra dimension of having to get it all right, and you're doing a fabulous job. So we're talking about museums and heritage decolonization. And I just wanted to share, building on from what Corinne was talking about earlier, about how there's all this pressure, and especially the government, around sort of decolonization. And decolonization is a word which I usually talk about decoloniality, because for me that concept covers more the sort of work that we need to do. But decolonization as a word, I think, has been sort of put in the corner of wokery, and has been put in the corner of the things that only certain people do, and actually is a little bit problematic. By some people it gets put in the corner of people just use it as a buzzword, and it's not really important, the work that needs to be done. But I think that what we wanted to know at the Pitt Rivers Museum, where decoloniality is really a very important part of our work that we need to do, we wanted to know, what is it about the work that needs doing that people, yes or no, take offense by? And is it so widespread, actually, that people are annoyed by the work that decolonization does? And so we worked with, I don't know if you can pull up the slide. Yeah, sorry. We worked with Stack Data Strategy, who do polls for the government, and they do polls for organizations. And so they asked about 1,500 people in the UK of different sort of parts of the UK and different ages, and etc. And they asked some questions that we worked with them quite hard to make sure they weren't just going to give us the trap of whataboutisms or people being already sort of put off because they think we're going to empty our museums by restituting. And we wanted to know what sort of part of the work that we're all doing together, which is updating the museum, really, bringing in more factual information, which is about bringing in more voices, more well-rounded stories, and making space for stories which have been hidden for too long, hidden histories, hidden voices, underrepresented communities. What is it about? Is it the word decolonizing that actually makes people sort of less supportive or more supportive? And so what we did is we sort of went and asked questions about how, if we want to tell more well-rounded stories, histories, and ensure everyone from all walks of life feel welcome in the museum, what we need to do is to work with a greater diversity of people locally and globally. We want to make sure more stories are told from different perspectives. And how supportive are you of those recent initiatives? And what we did is we asked 1/3 of those people if we would call it decolonizing the museum, 1/3 of the people if we did the exact same thing, because we gave them examples of what we would be doing. And we said we're making the museum an anti-racist museum. We're doing anti-racism work. And the last one was updating the museum for modern times. And so it was about sort of more contemporary, making it, updating the museum. And what actually came out is that the broad public support was there to seeking to acknowledge colonial histories and to be anti-racist institutions. And in particular, the work around anti-racism was felt by most people to be really important. That 50%, however, of the British public is unaware of wider conversations around anti-racism or decolonization in the context of museums. So we have some advocacy work to do there. Then also that sort of the efforts to decolonize and make museums anti-racist can have a real impact on the propensity of people to visit museums. So on the one hand, it was mostly people who were very supportive of a lot of the work, were people who were already coming to museums a lot. So for those people, we're not going to lose those people by doing this work. But it was also a support from people, about 50% of the people who are not coming to museums a lot yet, to actually start doing that work. So obviously that is not that they're all going to rush into a museum finally when we do that work, but it certainly isn't going to put those people off. So there's a lot more that I could say about what came out of those sort of polls, but I thought it would just be good for us not to, I sometimes feel like we all have to defend the fact that we're doing this work. Well, actually, if we know that there's broad support in the UK population, this was just sort of a random poll to people going, that also will be asked about whether they're going to vote for Labour or whether they're going to, sort of they're in favour of the railroads becoming public property again. So I think we can feel a bit more sort of reassured that actually this is the pathway that we can be on. And that's what our panelists are going to be talking about today. Some of the work that they're doing, leading the sort of work that needs doing by our institutions. Some of it has to do with, and you'll be able to actually go upstairs and see this phenomenal work that has just opened in a new exhibition. And so when I was walking around yesterday, I thought, wow, they're just putting it in big letters on the wall that we're going to bring marginalized voices and stories to the fore, and we're going to exchange ideas, and we're going to highlight and redress the injustices of the past, and we're going to face up to uncomfortable truths. And it's just right there, big letters. It was also nice to see that sort of some of the stories that were written were really explicit about the problematic colonial components, and there was even some part of our decolonization work, and Sharon is here, sort of cited in the exhibition, which was quite exciting because we spent a lot of time for a year, I think, over a year, I think, thinking about how do we write this decolonization guidance. And then there were new objects that have been collected and talking about how do we shape our future. And sometimes it's quite difficult to think about shaping our future when we're in the middle of it, and it almost feels like we're just sort of in this dark tunnel, and there certainly should be some light at the end of the tunnel. And that's when I think of Rebecca Solnit and sort of her work around hope in the dark. And Rebecca sort of talking about how sometimes it's so important to keep sort of our eye on the ball and think about hope, and not hope as a sort of we're going to sit back and just see what happens, but it's hope about action, hope about doing things differently. And so that's what I want to talk, I'm going to hand over to Hannah Crowdy, who's the head of the curatorial department here at the National Museums of Northern Ireland. She has a very expansive experience with making exhibitions, and some of those you'll be able to go see as you're here, or you will have seen because you are from here, such as the exhibition on the Troubles and the Beyond exhibition at the Ulster Museum. So do go up and go see it. I don't think you need a lot more introduction. I'm just going to hand over to you.